Oh, hello. Welcome back. So, this mini lecture is going to talk about the Confederate Homefront during the American Civil War. And we're going to look at 5 things broadly that you should understand and be thinking about as you go to read and learn more about this topic. It's a very complex topic, and there's a lot of research here, so let's dig in. First off, Jefferson Davis. All right, if you've never heard of him, Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederate States of America, and he's somewhat of a interesting or troubling figure for many reasons. Obviously, our own 21st century sensibilities, but also he was really terrible at taking criticism, and he was not a very good public speaker, which for somebody to be a head of state, those are usually 2 qualities that the public, broadly tends to, like. Secondly, the draft. So, despite the initial outpouring of support on the part of individuals in the Confederacy for the Confederate Army, pretty early on, it's clear they're going to need more men. And remember, the racial realities of this time dictated that the Confederate Army is for whites only, and it would stay that way for the whole war. So they're going to need individuals to serve in the Army. And so what you would see is conscription, all right? So they're going to pass a draft in 1862, and they're going to conscript many, many, many individuals into the Confederate Army. It's something like 75 to 80% of all Confederate white men would eventually serve in the military. Now, you could get out of conscription in the South during the war. So if you owned at least 20 slaves, if you had a critical occupation, which there were a lot of different definitions of what critical were or was, you could get out of it as well. Now, the third thing which goes along kind of with this, and it's important for us to note, is no black soldiers. So again, given the racial realities of the Confederate States of America and of the southern states prior to the American Civil War, there were no African American soldiers who served in the Confederate Army. Now, after the war was over, lost cause groups such as the United Confederate Veterans and others have attempted to perpetuate a myth that pushes this narrative forward, but there is no actual evidence that documents that African American soldiers, be they enslaved individuals or otherwise, took up arms in support of the Confederacy. You do, in some cases, have enslaved individuals forced into service with or in support of their masters. But this is not the same thing as voluntary service on behalf of a state that you believe in their objective of victory. It's not the same. All right. Fourthly, New Orleans. So the city of New Orleans is captured in 1862. New Orleans was a financial hub of the Confederacy. A lot of banking houses and stuff like that, a lot of shipping going in and out of New Orleans, not just, New Year's Eve parties and stuff like that. So New Orleans is captured in 1862, and it is occupied by the United States military. And the commander there is a general by the name of Benjamin Butler. Now, Benjamin Butler and the occupying force were noted for their treatment, particularly of women in New Orleans, particularly brutal treatment of women. Their support of basically legalizing rape against Confederate, women, Southern women, is something that we should acknowledge. For it's a terrible tragedy. All right. Fifth, economic collapse. The American South, the southern states that made up the Confederacy, relied on the export of goods prior to the American Civil War in order to maintain their economic might. Obviously, cotton is the #1 export good here. But generally, if you destroy the ability of this economy to export goods, and they're unable to produce many goods internally or import many goods, their economy is going to collapse, and it does. Inflation ran between 6 and 9,000% by the time you get to the end of 1864, and this has a profound effect on the ability of the Confederate military to project force by the time you get to the spring of 1865. All Thank you very much.